as I'm sure you noticed over the years, we always read the parshiyot related to Yosef and Tzaddik around Chanukah time, right? Like literally all the parshas where Yosef is the main character happened before, during, and after Chanukah. So that leads us to believe that naturally that's not something that's random, that happens for a reason. And there's got to be a connection between the two. And that's the connection that I wanted to explore today. So first, obviously, the facts that, like, everyone knows, right? We have Yosef, who, as I realized today, is the same age as my youngest son, Ari, 17 years old. At this young age, something happens to him that I hope never happens to any of my children, right? He's being sold into slavery, and he ends up in Mitzrayim. So in Mitzrayim, obviously, it's an extremely difficult situation, right? He's enslaved. He's imprisoned. Then there's a lot of temptation surrounding him. There's a lot of pressure from the wife of Potiphar. And then once he becomes a prime minister, you can imagine that being a prime minister of a superpower where anything goes, you can do anything you want, right? So there's a lot of temptation, a lot of ways to do inappropriate things when no one will even know, but you can still do them, right? And so, yeah. So there's no, so either which way you look at it, there's a lot of pressure on yourself. And under all of this pressure, we know that he manages to pull through, and he manages to stay true to his Yiddishkeit and not to succumb under pressure, not to succumb under temptation, right? To stay Yosef and Tzaddik, despite everything. And if we think about it, right, the similar setup we can observe with Maccabees and general with the Jews at the time of the Hanukkah story, right? You have the Greek domination, and there's a lot of pressure on the Jews. At some point, the Torah becomes pretty much outlawed, right? They forbid Shabbos, they forbid Brit Milah, they forbid Torah study on one hand, and it's forbidden under the penalty of under the death penalty, right? And on the other hand, all you have to do, right? Greeks weren't like discriminating Jews 100% just because that's it, right? All you have to do is to say, I accept Hellenism, I become a normal Greek Jew, I accept Hellenistic traditions, and you can even combine them with your stuff as long as you accept that Yiddishkeit does not have the unique license over all things spiritual, and you can only do it this way or no other way. Just become a normal Hellenistic Jew, and you can make a career. You can have position in the government. Like, you're not discriminated anymore. You can enjoy life, all its pleasures, right? So the same thing as Yosef goes through, right? On one hand, there's discrimination and pressure. On the other hand, there's a lot of temptation. And what we see ultimately, what happens with Jews, we'll look at Hashmonaim and others that joined them in the rebellion, right? These are the people that did not cave under pressure, and these are the people that did not succumb to temptation, right? They didn't give up their Yiddishkeit. They didn't say, it's too difficult. I have bills to pay. Why don't I just, become a normal Hellenized Jew and make a career and, get a good government job and benefits and everything, healthcare, why not?
Right? Obamacare.
Right. So, get the affordable care and, enjoy my life, So we see that not happening, right? And so it's a lot of parallels between yourself, and this is on the most basic, obvious level. Now, interesting thing happens that when Yosef has a feast for his brothers, when they bring the Binyamin, and they all have this feast, and he's together with his brother, and he's so excited to see him and all, right? There are Meforshim that say that for Yosef, he had this like premonition of Hanukkah at that feast. And he saw that just like what he was working towards is the reunification of the family, right? The brothers did him ill, and he had all the right to be upset with them and whatever, but we know that's not at all what he does. He wants to bring the family together. He wants to heal the family. He wants to reunite with his brothers, and that's what he's working on, and it pays off. So the same thing happens at the time of the Greeks, is that when the Jews finally unite for the common cause, common goal, they managed to come victorious in the struggle with the world's most advanced military at the time, right? Which geopolitically, that victory is just insane. It's impossible, right? A bunch of religious Jews with no military training defeating the world's greatest military of the time, which has all the equipment and the training, and you name it, they got it, right? But the Jews have the unity, and through that unity, they get a bracha that allows them to defeat Greeks no matter the military difference, right? And this is the idea that something that Yosef saw, just like he had a reunion with his brothers and he's going to heal his family, when the Jews in the future are going to be in trouble with Greeks, when they find in themselves to unite, that union will be enough to overcome any military advantage Greeks may otherwise have over the Jewish people. Now, there's a beautiful observation by Megala Amukas. Megala Amukas is a 17th century mystical commentary, right? He found the genius Gematria. And he says, if you notice, the Gematria of his name Yosef is 156. Guess who else has the same Gematria? Antiochus is also 156.
Wow.
But he says, I'll tell you more, even better. The phrase Melech Yavan, the king of Greece, is also 156. So he says that what that means mystically is that when the Jews reunite to fight for Yiddishkeit against all odds, against the Greeks at the time of Chanukah, he says the soul force of Yosef is reincarnated to help the Jews to fight the Greeks. He says it's like Yosef and Antiochus are two antipodes, right? That's why their Gematria is the same. And as we will see, Antiochus was no ordinary, uneducated, brute king. He actually had very good idea of what he was doing and why he was doing it that way. So when did the Greeks attack the Jews and manage to overcome the Jews? When the Jews had fighting between themselves, right? Fighting between the brothers. That created a spiritual opening for the Greeks to overcome the Jews. That's why the Greeks came and they took over. So on the opposite of that, when the Jews come together, right, when they overcome that disharmony that led to Yosef's sale in the time of the brothers, or to the internal conflicts at the time of the Chanukiah events, right? So if the baseless hatred among the Jews leads to disaster, then when the Jews reunite and remove the hatred between themselves, right, that can lead to the solution, right? So it says in Zohar Kodesh that the Greek exile was pretty much a spiritual replay of the Yosef saga, right? Just like the jealousy between the brothers and the betrayal of Yosef eventually led to slavery. Same thing in the Second Temple era. The conflicts between the Jews led to assimilation and Greek oppression and so on. And the reason Antiochus was able to decree against Shabbat and Brit Milah and Torah at the very mitzvot that essential to atone for the sale of Yosef is because the Jews were fighting among themselves. And when the Jews did teshuvah and they band together like true brothers, right, then Hashem immediately delivered them from the hand of Antiochus. Right, so we will see even deeper connection between what Antiochus did during his times and Yosef. I'll get to that, but also it's very interesting teaching we have from Arizal. So Arizal says that as we all know, Yosef Tzaddik is associated with quality in creation that we call Yesod, right? Hashem has 10 forces through which he, as through like Lego pieces, combines and builds the things in the world, right? What we call the 10 Sefirot, all the way from Keter to Malchut and everything in between. Sephira number 9 is called Yesod, and we associate different Sefirot with different Tzaddikim that were the embodiment of this quality. So like everybody knows, Abraham was Ish Chesed, right? He's the embodiment of the quality of Chesed. And Yitzchak was Gevura, Yaakov was Tiferet. So Yosef's role was to be the embodiment of the quality of Yesod in this world. So Arizal says like this, something very interesting. He said, if you look at the Jewish months, your normal average month is 30 days, right? We have 10 spheres. Every sphere gets 3 days. The first 3 days of the month is the sphere of Keter, and the second 3 days is Chochmah, and so on. You saw the sphere number 9. So which days does the sphere of Yesod gets in a month? It gets the days 25, 26, 27. When does the Hanukkah start? The Hanukkah starts on the 25th of the month of Kislev. The day 25 in every month is the day when the sphere of Yesod is dominant in that month. Right? So it says it's not random that the Hanukkah, which is so connected to Yosef, who is the embodiment of the quality of Yesod, started specifically on the 25th day of the month and not on any other day. Furthermore, there's something unique about Hanukkah. Unlike any other holiday, and we have many holidays in our calendar, right? Something unique about Hanukkah, and that is the fact that it is the only holiday in the calendar that spans over 2 months. It begins in Kislev, it goes through Rosh Chodesh Tevet, and it ends in Tevet. There's no other holiday that goes over a month's barrier, right? All the other holidays belong to 1 month and 1 month only, right? Rosh Hashanah is Tishrei, and Pesach is only Nisan, and Shavuos, and so on, right? Is in Sivan. So the only holiday that spans over 2 months is the holiday of Hanukkah, which is connected to Yosef. So he points out to another beautiful connection here. Yosef, unlike all other Shvatim, all other brothers, got the double portion. In what sense? In the sense that all the other brothers got 1 tribe among the 12 tribes of Israel, who is the only brother that got 2 tribes among the 12 tribes of Israel. It's Yosef, because Yaakov Avinu elevated his sons Ephraim and Menashe to the level of full-blown Shvatim. So he is the only brother that has the double portion in the tribes of Israel through his sons, and he's the only brother whose sons were elevated on the level equal with the other brothers. No other child of no other brother got to that level. Not Yehuda, not Levi, not anybody, right? So, and the same thing we see here, right? It's a double portion. Is the holiday that we associate with Yosef, which is Hanukkah, is the only holiday that is in 2 months. All the other holidays is in just 1 month. Further, as a result, is that Hashem went out of his way to make sure that Yosef was born on Rosh Hashanah. Why? Because Rosh Hashanah is also a quite unique holiday. It's a holiday that happens on the new moon. On the new moon, what's so special about the new moon? That's the time you don't see the moon. It's completely hidden, right? Just like Yosef was a hidden tzaddik, even his brothers looked at him and they couldn't understand his righteousness. And in Egypt, when everybody looked at him, everybody saw, even his brothers when they came, saw just some Egyptian prime minister in Egyptian clothing and whatever. And underneath all of that, you had one of the most holiest souls to ever exist. But what's another thing about Rosh Hashanah is the holiday of complete self-abnegation, right? Because on Rosh Hashanah we say that we voluntarily give up our independence and we crown Hashem a king over us, and He can rule over us any which way He feels that He wants to, despite of what we may want, right? We put ourselves aside. We say, Hashem, you're the king, and as the king, you can do whatever. So, and we voluntarily want that. Right? We completely give up ourselves, and that's the story of Yosef and Tzaddik. Is that he was, if you look at even how he speaks, every time he never takes credit. He will always say, the explanation doesn't come from me; it comes from Elohim, it comes from God, right? He will always say, it's not me; it's God that just works through me. I'm just a medium to implement His desire or pass information or whatever it may be, right? It's not me; it's Hashem, right? So it's complete battle, complete nullification of self. And that's, he says, that's the reason why Hashem wanted him to be born on Rosh Hashanah, because Rosh Hashanah is the holiday that embodies that quality. Furthermore, one of the three things that Antiochus outlawed was Brit Milah, right? The covenant of circumcision. So, on which day do we do circumcision?
8.
Day number 8. How many days do we have in Hanukkah?
8.
Now that I finally have a correct menorah behind me, I said in Russian before you, 8, count the candles behind me, and one of the guys was like texting me, by the way, you have 10 candles. So I'm like, oh my, OMG, I do. But now I finally got 8, right? So we have Brit Milah on the 8th day, and have Chanukah with 8 days in it, and it's obviously not random. Further, what is Yosef famous for? One of the things he's famous for is that the wife of the Potiphar wanted to have an inappropriate relationship with him, and I assume for a 17-year-old kid that got sold into slavery, and finally, he's working as a manager, and it's not so bad. This is the wife of his boss, and she can change his life completely, which she did. Ended up in prison, right? And 17 years old, a good-looking woman wants something from you, and she's okay to do it in complete privacy and secrecy. It's not like she wants her husband to find out, right? So the temptation is insane. Right? Ask any 17-year-old right now how easy would it be to refuse in that case. If they are honest, they're going to say it's not easy, near impossible, right? So which part of the body we associate this desire with? The part where Brit Milah happens for a man, right? So this is where Yosef excelled. He said, no, I know this is wrong. It doesn't matter that nobody's going to find out. It doesn't matter, we're going to keep it a secret. I know, Hashem knows, and it's wrong. Period. Right? So he excels specifically, among other things, but specifically was what was the part of the body, right, that is responsible for all this temptation, right, which and associated with Brit Milah. Right, so it's no accident that Antiochus speaks Brit Milah is one of the things that he wants to outlaw, right? And by the way, if you recall how usually when they draw the spheros in the shape of a human body, right, the sphere of Yisod is associated with a male organ that has Brit Milah on it, right? So, and we're saying that this is the sephira that is Yosef is embodiment of this quality. Right? Because he actually kept it pure, he didn't succumb to the temptation, he kept it holy. Right? So Antiochus wants to negate that, and he understands that if the connection between Hashem and the Jewish people is based on the covenant of circumcision, if the Jewish people stop observing circumcision, then the covenant is gone. right? The covenant is different from simple agreement. Agreement usually is like, you do this, I do this. If you don't do that, I don't do this, right? Here, all the Jewish people have to do is just do that little ritual on day 8 and bring that child into the union with Hashem. And for the rest of his life, it's practically nothing you can do to bring that union between Hashem and that Jew. Almost impossible. And for Greeks, that was like, we can't have that, right? We cannot overcome the Jews when they have that kind of connection with their God, right? So we need to cut off the connection, and then we can deal with the rest, right? So Antiochus is very meticulous and thought through the things that he does, not random at all. On the other hand, the sphere of Yesod, the same sphere is responsible for the Brit Milah, is responsible for bringing children into this world, right? This is where the life seed comes from, to impregnate the woman so that she can develop a child, right? So to increase the amount of souls in the world, right? Which is also related, obviously, to Yosef's name, right? Yosef means to add. And the same idea we have is with Chanukiah lights, right? Every night of the Chanukiah, we increase light, we add more light, just like Yosef's name, right? When Rachel has him, she has Yosef Li Hashem Ben Acher, right? What's his name? That he will add another son, right? Adding more light, right? So that's what we do on Hanukkah. Another interesting connection from Chatam Sofer is with what we call ketonit pasim, right? The multicolored tunic coat that Yaakov made for Yosef. So it says that he used 2 silayim, 2 units of wool, to make that coat, which was the source of the big jealousy and conflict. And so he explains very interestingly what was this jealousy and conflict and disagreement about, right? Because obviously it can't be just over a coat. That's just, too petty for someone who's going to be the founding fathers of the Jewish people. Not just like changing history because somebody's got a better coat than you do. So he explains like this. He says it's very important that it says 2 silayim. Why 2? Because the 2 silayim are connected to 2 most important rabbinical holidays we have, which is Purim and Hanukkah. Right? Purim and Hanukkah are the 2 major holidays that instituted by the Chachamim, by our rabbis. So another thing that is unique about these holidays is that, unlike the holidays and events of the Torah, where usually we see open miracles, the sea splitting, the makos, all the miraculous stuff, Purim is completely, Hashem is guiding every single event in the story of Purim, but it's completely hidden, right? If you look from a side of all the events of Purim, it's just normal human events unfolding, and then they result in a certain way, right? There's no sea splitting, there's no manna falling, there's no hail with fire inside it. Nothing miraculous. It's just like certain political conflict, and this wife fell out of grace, and this wife got married, and this. Like, if you look at it from outside, it all looks like completely normal events. But we know that, and even in the whole Megillah, right? We don't even mention Hashem's name; it's hidden, right? So, similarly with Hanukkah, yes, we have maybe the little thing with the can of oil lasting longer than it's supposed to. Okay, but if you look at the actual events of the Hanukkah, it's normal geopolitical events, right? You have one country invading the other country, and then you have the guerrilla warfare, and then they, successful, whatever. It's difficult. Was it easy to defeat the strongest army of the world at that time? Of course it wasn't. But if you looked at the actual battles and how things happened and unfolded, right, you wouldn't see open miracles in them. Can you see Hashem's hand in the events of Hanukkah? Of course, right? but the events themselves are not each individual event. It's just a regular event. So rabbinical holidays are like, he says, it's like levushim, it's like garments over the Torah holidays, right? You have the Torah with its God-instituted holidays, and then they have the rabbis came and they said, let's do Purim, let's do Chanukah. So he says, it says on the door that there was a big conflict between the brothers and the Yosef. Yeah, brothers totally understood the miracles and the holidays of the Torah. That they had no question with. That was for them totally something that they were completely in tune with. What they didn't understand is the miracles that are hidden miracles in Galus. When you're not in Eretz Israel, when you're in some foreign country, be it Persia or be it Mitzrayim or somewhere else, and you don't see open miracles, and yet somehow God directs all the events, and when you look at them retroactively, you understand that it has to be miraculous, right? But it's not an open Torah miracle, right? Yosef was the only one who was able to see it and appreciate it, right? Who was able to appreciate the rabbinical side of the miracles, right? Because Yosef was able to see how you can be in a foreign, hostile environment, remain Jewish despite all odds, and not only remain Jewish, but actually increase in your Yiddishkeit and become stronger, right? Because Yosef manages somehow, he's got 2 kids that are born in the Egyptian palace, and they can do and afford anything in the world, right? There's the richest people in the world. And they end up growing up completely frum and Jewish and holy, and become no less than the Shvatim of the tribes of Israel. Something that the kids that were born back in Israel to his brothers never got to this level. Right? So Yosef can see how God can direct events not only in the open, holy environment of Eretz Israel, inside the family of Yaakov, Abraham, or Yitzchak, whatever, but even when you're in Israel, even when you're in Persia, even when you with Lavan, doesn't matter, right? Which is something that Yaakov could appreciate because he had gone through his personal galus, which is a model of the galus of the Jewish people, with Lavan, right? So Yaakov saw this was a unique quality of Yosef. He is able to see this, and Yaakov knew the Jewish people are going to be in galus, right? Which is why he chose him, because he knew this was the only possible leader for what's to come, who can actually make it work in galus. So the same thing is right with the events of Hanukkah, and this is why it says that the Greeks said to the Jews that you have to write on the horn of the bull that you have no portion in the God of Israel. What does that mean? Right? So it's like, first of all, they stick into the Jews. You're not so holy yourself. You did the golden calf, right? There's a bull that we can always stick into your face and say, don't try and be so holy with us. We know what you did. But more importantly, we know that Yaakov calls Yosef Shor, the bull, right, in his bracha, right? It says right on the horn of the bull that there is no special portion of the God of Israel, right? Because Antiochus, as we said, is anti-Yosef. He says that you think that you can live through Galus and retain your Yiddishkeit. We're going to Hellenize every single one of you. Just give us a little bit of time. We'll promise you're not going to stay Jewish. There's no, you don't have the special connection that you think you have to withstand the pressure we're going to put on you. That's what the Greeks are saying. Right? And the Chanukiah lights, just like Yosef against all odds in his environment, remains true to his Yiddishkeit and even thrives and becomes even more holy. So when the push comes to shove, ultimately the Jews at the time of Hanukkah, the same thing happens. They think they're going to Hellenize us all, and we're going to give up the temptation, and we're going to make career in the government, and we're going to, give up all the difficulties of Yiddishkeit just for the sake of some normal or successful life or whatever. And it didn't work out, right? There were Jews that said, no, we're going to make it work. Well, we're going to make it work in a different way. Hashem will somehow make it work. We don't know how, but somehow it will work. So another interesting perspective comes from Breslov, and they discuss the famous machloikis in Gemara between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel of how to light the menorah. Right? Beis Shammai famously says we start with 8 candles and we go down, and Beis Hillel says we start with 1 and we go up. We increase the light every night, which is what we do because we follow Beis Hillel. So he explains it in a very interesting way. Rabbi Nachman explains it like this. He says that it's very similar to the argument between Yosef and his brothers. He says there are two types of tzaddikim we often see through the course of our history. There are some tzaddikim like brothers initially, and then the brothers actually grew spiritually towards the end of the story. But initially, right, some tzaddikim, he says, have taken very judgmental view, and they felt that, you know what, not everyone is deserving of the closeness to divine light. You give the divine light to everyone, they're just gonna mess it up. They're not worthy of it. You know what? The most light just give to very special holy people. And people that are a little bit less educated, give them, 7 candles. And people that are on a smaller level, give them 5 candles. And maybe to most rest of the people, we'll give them their 1 candle, and that's good enough for them. Because if you give them all 8, they're just gonna screw it up. And then there's another approach, he says. The other approach is no. That's the approach of Beis Hillel, and this is clearly how Yosef lived his life, right? Yosef says, I can go down for the sake of elevating those that are on a level lower than me. I'm not afraid that if I go to them, they're going to drag me down into the mud. I'm going to pull them up. I'm going to pull them out. That's what Yosef's whole philosophy and approach was his whole life. And it didn't only apply to the Jewish people. Wherever he goes, like he's in a prison with 2 ministers in the prison, right? He comes in, why are you depressed? Let me help you, right? He's in the Potiphar's house, right? He's improving his situation. Wherever he goes, he comes to Pharaoh. He immediately gives him a plan of how to make Egypt great again. Immediately, that's the first thing he says. Here's what's happening, and here's what you need to do. Do this, and Egypt will be great again. So wherever he goes, he adds light. And ultimately, what did it lead to? That he created a foundation that was in place so that when the time came, he could save the Jewish people. He could provide them with everything they needed. He could sponsor every yeshiva they wanted to build in Goshen, and he could save the Jewish people and build a foundation and allow the family not only to survive, but to thrive. So at the end of the day, everything he does always increases the amount of light in the world. That's even his name, right? Yosef means to add, right? Whenever he touches something, there's more of it, right? Like it says that they got to the point when they were gathering grain that they couldn't even count anymore. They didn't have the big enough numbers, to put in their accounting books to account for all the grain that they gathered, right? Because why? Because who was the main manager of that project? Yosef. You get a manager like Yosef, at some point you get to the, where you don't know how to count anymore, and that's a good problem to have, right? And so the same thing is idea of what Beis Hillel says. Beis Hillel says no. We always need to go up in Kedusha. We always need to increase light. Not only that, we need to bring it wherever we can, which is why halachically you're supposed to put the menorah in a place where it will publicize the miracle. Like your ideal place for menorah is in your doorway, right? You open your door, and that's the best place. We practically rarely do that because there's the wind, the bugs and whatever. But ideally, if you look at Shulchan Aruch, the best place is open your door and put the menorah in the, so the people from the street can see it. what we do practically speaking right now, we put it in the window, right? But when you choose the window to put, you choose the window that faces the most public thoroughfare that you can face from your house, right? Like a room I'm in right now facing the backyard. So if I put a menorah at this window, no one is going to see it. Literally, maybe deer. They do come. Deer, no one will appreciate my menorah if I put it on this window, right? So I put it on the one that faces Westover, our road, so that at least maybe people will walk by or drive by, whatever. There's a chance that he's going to see my menorah, right? So with menorah, we want to make it public, and we want to increase the light, more light, more light, more light, and that was really the way Yosef lived his life, right? And so that's the idea, right? That the light of Yosef and the light of the menorah is what they call the Or Haganus, the hidden light, right? That we say that when Hashem created the world, there was, at the first moment, there was this very special light that he'd hidden for the future to reward tzaddikim with it, right? But we also sometimes this special hidden light, it just peers through the cracks into our reality a little bit, right? A little bit here, a little bit there. Like in Beis HaMikdash, right? The light that came from the menorah, from the Beit HaMikdash, that was that light peering out into the creation. So the same thing is the light of menorah. They say that the light of menorah is the ray of this Or Haganus, of this hidden light that of creation. And also the same way is the light of Yosef, right? The way he was, and the auras that he had, and everything that was just glowing around him wherever he went. As we read about his life story, everything he touches turns to gold, right? Everything glows when he appears in the room, right? Because he had that hidden light in him. And so we see that, right, with Yosef. I'll just conclude with the idea that three things that Antiochus forbade. We already talked about Brit Milah, and he also forbade Torah learning and Shabbat, right? So what are the three things that were most crucial in the life of Yosef, right? Number one is Shabbat, means Torah observance. What is the most difficult, if not impossible, thing for a Jew to do if, God forbid, he's enslaved or imprisoned or in some other tough situation like that? Is to keep Shabbat and mitzvahs, right? It becomes technically impossible sometimes. And we know that despite all odds, somehow Yosef always managed to keep the mitzvahs, right? And then, how did he manage this? Yosef had a very special role to play in creation, right? Yaakov chose him on a role of leadership for a reason, because he saw that of all the brothers, he is the only one who is capable of absorbing the entire tradition. And those traditions that come from Adam HaRishon, those traditions from Metoshelach, those traditions from Noah, from Shem, from Ever, from Abraham, from Yitzchak, all of that came to Yaakov Avinu. And now he had to choose someone that can absorb all that and then pass it on to the next generation. And Yaakov looked around at all his children. They were all wonderful people. And he saw that with all of that, the only one who can actually is capable of having the broad enough mind to take all that in and apply it in any situation, be it in the holiness of their home or in slavery in Mitzrayim or whatever else may happen, was Yosef, right? Which is why he gave him because he saw that Yosef has this Or Haganus, right? That he can be in prison, he can be enslaved, he can be a prime minister with the temptations that come with that job. He always has that hidden light that he is in touch with that will help him to be strong in his Yiddishkeit. Right? And that's what we see on Hanukkah, right? There's always that little jug of oil that no matter how much damage the Greeks managed to do, how they on purpose defiled everything they could put their hands on, there's always that hidden light that Hashem has in store for each one of us, that if you get your hands on it, it doesn't matter where you will be. It does not matter. What comes to mind is a great tzaddik of our time, Rabbi Zilber, and the book about him, I translated it to English, spoke to Remain Jewish, I think. And Rabbi Yitzchak spent some time in Stalin's camp and difficult situations in Soviet Union and whatnot. And he had one thing that he was able to do, no matter what the circumstances were. Like, he could be in Stalin's concentration camp in Siberia with all the horrible circumstances around him. And he said he could just, like, whenever he get a chance, he could sit down on a log of wood in the forest where the prisoners were working and just close his eyes and literally, like, see a Mishnah or something in front of his eyes and just start reading it and going over it and, thinking about it and, and he's at that moment, the Soviet Union disappeared and the concentration camp disappeared and whatever. He was in his own world with his Mishnah, with Gematria, whatever it was that he was thinking about at the moment. He said he just knew that he can close his eyes and just, think of something, learn some Torah in his mind, and completely dissociate from the horrible reality that he was in at the time. And there was nothing they could do about it. They already put him in the prison. What else are they gonna do? He's already in the camp, right? A person is gonna sit down, lay down at night, maybe to sleep. You can take the Jew out of his environment, but you cannot take the Yiddishkeit out of the Jew if he doesn't want to let it go, right? So he was able to always find that little jug of oil, despite the Stalin's camp and bitter winter of Siberia, whatever the circumstances, right? He just knew, I have that little jug. There's nothing they can do to me. I can just sit down, close my eyes, see that Mishnah, go over the lines, think about it, say them out loud quietly, whatever it is, there's nothing they can do to take that away. And so that's what we see in Yosef, and that's what we see in Hashmonaim, and so many other wonderful, amazing people we have in our history. And that's what we have in ourselves too. Even if we're in South Carolina.
Redneckistan
or Dunwoody, Georgia, doesn't matter, right? We always have a little jog, like I'll move aside on purpose, like that miraculous shamash that I have floating thanks to Google in the middle of the menorah with nothing holding it.
Yeah, when do you think a Jew all alone in South Carolina is going to get a police escort to toivel the things for Hanukkah?
Exactly.
It's too funny, it's like, how gonna you even believe it? The guy says, if you want to end the recording, it's okay. I tell you the story anyway.